Everybody, welcome. I can see everyone starting to come in to the webinar, so thank you all. I'm going to give it just a few seconds. Everyone's coming in, and then we'll go over some housekeeping and intros. All right, I know everyone's still kind of coming in, but we'll go ahead and kick it off with a little bit of housekeeping. Welcome to today's webinar, How Ambition Uses Ambition to Manage Remote Teams in a Tough Selling Climate. A little bit of housekeeping, we are recording, so if you need to hop off or you want to send this to a friend, we've got you covered. We're going to record everything today. A lot of people are on the line, so everyone's going to be muted automatically. We cannot hear you, but feel free to use the chat and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can in there. And submit any questions and we'll try to make time to get to them at the end if we're able, and if not, we'll follow up with you guys afterwards. We're also going to be sending out some polls along the way, and we will be able to have you guys participate in that. So let's go ahead and kick it off with introductions. My name is Mary Foster. I am on the customer and product marketing team at Ambition. I have Chris O'Connor with me, the head of sales development, and Andy Dewey, sales development team lead. So they're going to be on the webinar today. And here's what we're going to go over. We're going to go over virtual accountability and coaching. So you're going to get to see our SDR coaching cadence, what alerts and triggers our teams use, our scorecards, and how we are handling the remote move right now, virtual accountability and coaching. Then we're also going to talk about a lot of the early trends that we're seeing selling in this tough time right now. So find out, like, are we booking meetings? How we're booking meetings? What are we seeing for connects and dials? And we have Andy here to actually represent, our SDR team and kind of what they're seeing as early trends right now. So, right now the majority, if not all, sales teams are remote. In the days past, for like accountability, it was probably easier when you had actual eyes and ears on the sales floor. You didn't necessarily need data to tell you if your team was making phone calls. You could hear them. You didn't necessarily need a triggered alert to celebrate a meeting booked because people were probably already cheering on the floor and you could participate. Our team, though, has been remote since pre-corona times in some capacity, and so we have really learned how to leverage the power of data, celebration alerts, issue detection alerts, and more. And so, one thing that I thought was really interesting with remote teams being for sure more cost efficient, and some studies say happier. There's a study, obviously pre-corona, people might change their tune now, but it's at 34% of US workers would take a pay cut to get to work remotely. So, we just wanted to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and stick a poll out there too to find out what your teams or you think about if you prefer working from home. But in this time where people may or may not go back to an office situation, here's some things, Chris, I wanted you to get to share how you're using Ambition to coach your remote team right now, what alerts are important to you, scorecards and things like that. So you guys feel free to take a few more seconds to participate in the poll, and then we'll let Chris get talking.
Yeah, so thanks, Mary. Excited to be, speaking with you guys today. I think we can all agree we're living in an unprecedented time, and it's so important, I think, at this juncture to really share any learnings or best practices that we have with our community. So that being said, I'm really excited to give you guys a quick glimpse of Ambition's remote sales manager toolkit and just kind of a look inside of how we're using Ambition. So, I think if you ask any sales leader about right now, what's top of mind for them, I think you're likely to hear a couple things. So one, how do I keep my reps engaged and motivated in this environment? Two, how do I keep my reps accountable to their metrics, right? Those are huge questions right now that have to be answered. And fortunately, Ambition is the tool that's really helping to answer those questions. And so what I want to do today, like I said, is actually show you firsthand. I'm going to share my screen, show you how I'm coaching my reps remotely, walk you through how I do a one-on-one with my team, and then actually show you some of the features within the Ambition platform that are going to help you coach more effectively. And then after that, we're going to discuss some of the alerts and triggers that we're using, both to hold reps more accountable, but then also to keep them motivated, recognized, celebrate wins together, all that good stuff. And then lastly, I'm also give you a quick sneak peek of the activity and objective scorecards that we're using, which I kind of consider some of the secret sauce behind the Ambition platform. So let's go ahead and jump in right now. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so what you're looking at, I've pulled it directly up to Andy's profile here in Ambition. And so what I want to kind of showcase is, as I'm preparing for my one-on-one with Andy, kind of what that process looks like for me, some of the information that I look at to get a better sense, a clearer picture of Andy's performance. So you'll notice the first tab that we're able to see are Andy's weekly activities. So currently there are 4 metrics that I'm looking at to assess Andy's activities throughout the week. So you'll notice we've got outbound calls, call connects, talk time, and then sequenced activities, which are going to be the emails, LinkedIn touches, social touches as well that he has in a cadence or sequence. And then I'll tab over here and show you, we'll take a quick look at Andy's monthly objectives. These are essentially his quotas that he's tracking towards for the month. So we've got meetings set, meetings held, pipeline created, and then qualified opportunities. So, that's kind of the holistic look of, Andy's performance for this month. And we'll talk a little bit more about the activity and objective scores here in just a moment. But I also can go out and look at, hey, are there any other metrics that may be important to me to prepare myself for this one-on-one? So as you can see, we've got a myriad of different metrics here. This is obviously configurable based on what you wanted to see. But I'll show you also, I'm going to take a quick look at what are the goals that I've set for Andy this month and how he's tracking towards those. So you'll notice here we've got 2 individual goals for Andy, as well as he's taking part in 2 team goals. So Andy, I see you're 155% to your ACV goal so far this month, and we're only halfway through. So maybe we need to rethink your quotas.
Yeah, we can talk about that offline.
But great month, Andy, by the way. So also we're going to take a look at any competitions that Andy's been involved in. So if you know Ambition, we're all about, spinning up competitions to drive more performance. And so we've got 2 competitions that Andy's currently in, one that ends tomorrow and one that ends at the end of the month. And so I'm going to take a sneak peek and see how Andy's performing in those 2 competitions. So it looks like he's in first place in one of them and second in another. So get a quick glimpse there. Again, this is all happening just before my one-on-one with him. I want to make sure that I understand the full picture of his performance before going into coaching. And then now it's time for the actual coaching session. And what I'm pulling up for you here is the actual agenda that Andy and I covered this week in our one-on-one. So this is the agenda that's sent out to Andy. I think it goes like 4 hours before our meeting. So he has a time to, understand what's on the agenda, add any commentary, things that he might want to cover in that session, and get really prepared for it. So then we have our one-on-one. I'm able to go in and add any notes if there are any action items or takeaways from that meeting. I can document all of that here. Maybe we, highlighted, something that Andy needs to improve on and decided that we wanted to create an action plan to improve on that certain metric. We can do that right from here. And I think we all know really the benefits of coaching our reps, but I think one thing that we often neglect is actually, documenting these and reporting out on, being able to report out on the data from that. I think it's just so important that these conversations are being cataloged somewhere, and we can go back and track and see, how Andy's performance is looking over a long period of time. So that's what I would run through typically on a weekly basis with Andy and his coaching. You can run a number of different other coachings throughout this process. Andy will talk about peer coaching that he does a little bit later. But I wanted to transition also to talk a little bit more about the triggers and alerts within Ambition that really help to create that culture that you're looking for on the sales team. And so, as we mentioned at the beginning, triggers and alerts can really serve multi-purpose. So first, they can serve to alert me as the manager when any of my sellers are veering off track, but they're also going to be, serve as recognition. We talked about, motivating reps and celebrating wins together. So those are going to be helpful for that. So I'm going to share a couple examples of each of those. So on the accountability side of triggers, one of them that we're using is called a 10 by 10. And I know a lot of our customers use this as well, but essentially we're asking each of our reps to make 10 phone calls by 10 a.m., really to get a jump start on their activity score for the day. And so at 10:01 every day, I receive an email that comes to me and lets me know who made 10 calls by 10 a.m., right? And so that's where I can kind of jump in and say, hey, Andy, you haven't made any calls today. It's already 10 o'clock. Let's get moving, my man. So that's one trigger that's really worked well for us. Another one that I've been utilizing recently is called a midweek activity score gut check. And essentially, if we look at their activity score for a week, it's on a percentage basis. And so on Wednesday at 12, I send a trigger alert out that lets everybody know what their activity score is for the week so far. So being right in the midpoint of the week, they should be at least at 50%. And if not, that's going to serve as kind of a virtual kick in the butt to get them motivated and get them going to have a solid back half of the week. And then, the other kind of accountability alert that I'm utilizing is just a daily performance report that's sent to my email every day at 5. And you can choose what metrics that you're interested in looking at, but I'm looking at both the activity score and the objective score for each of my reps. So it's going to send me that report on a daily basis and just provides a lot of context for me if any of my sellers are veering off track, maybe need a little bit more help from a coaching standpoint and things like that. So Ambition really helps let you know what's going on from a performance standpoint on your team. So we talked about accountability with triggers and alerts, but they also are really beneficial when it comes to motivating and recognizing your reps. I think one of the things that I most miss about being in the office with my reps is just the energy that everybody brings into the office and the ability to celebrate those wins together. And so we've really leaned in and leveraged, Ambition's abilities here to celebrate anytime a meeting is set, anytime someone hits a call goal, closed won deals that come across. We've even added exercise goals recently during the quarantine so that when someone hits a personal goal of theirs, we can all celebrate together. It typically is sent to a Slack channel that we utilize or a TV that we may have set up. And so that's another great way of remotely managing your reps and keeping that culture that you really want to build on your sales team. All right, and then the last thing I want to showcase for you guys is our activity and objective scorecards. Now, this is one I get questions on quite a bit from other sales leaders as it relates to assessing performance, running competitions. And what I'll tell you, I think as a sales leader, one of the most important things that we can do is to provide our reps with a really clear picture of what a successful day or week looks like from a performance standpoint. So for instance, I mean, when Andy logs off this afternoon, his computer at 5 o'clock or whatever he may log off, how does he know if today was a successful day or not, right? And I think utilizing metrics that he is in complete control over is really the key here. And so what we're looking at on my screen is how we determine what the activity score is for each rep. So I'm going to switch it. That was the inbound roll. I'm going to look at the outbound roll here. So again, 4 different metrics are going to go into what we consider an activity score for each rep. So we've got our calls, we've got our call connects, talk time, and sequenced activities. And you'll notice we've got a benchmark listed for each of those metrics. And then in the third column over, you'll also notice we've got a weighting, what we consider is important. Not all metrics are created equal. And so we have the ability to weight each of those metrics based on what we want to see. So in our case, we love that you're making phone calls, but it's really important that you're connecting with a decision maker on those calls. And so that's why we've weighted call connects higher than any other metric here. And then I'll scroll down and also show you our objective scores. So again, this is typically what you would consider Andy's quotas for the month. We've got these on a monthly basis. So it's meetings set. How many of those meetings get held? How many of those meetings move to pipeline and become qualified opportunities? And then how much revenue is associated with each of those qualified opportunities? So we've got benchmarks listed there for him. We can weight the importance. And again, it's all really to look at, like, how does Andy know if he's being successful or not? If you're looking at just one metric, it's really hard to tell whether that's true or not. So we're giving him a really clear picture of how he can be successful. And then the second piece of that is just, it's going to enable us to run competitions that are both fair and they're going to incent the right behaviors. If I was able to, spin up a competition tomorrow and I said, I want us to make as many calls as we can, the winner gets a $50 Amazon gift card, right? Guaranteed calls are going to go through the roof, right? You're going to get a ton of calls. But are you sacrificing quality, right? Are you getting people just dialing just to hit that call number? But when you're running a competition and I say, hey, I don't want just calls, I want your activity score to be the highest. The winner of that, gets a prize. Then you're really ensuring that, yes, your calls are going through the roof, but you're also making sure that you're getting quality dials, right? Because we're looking at multiple metrics here and ensuring that everything that we're incenting on, we're getting the right behaviors there. So that's a quick look at activity scores, objective scores. Again, that's really foundational piece of what we do here at Ambition. Happy to continue the conversation on these topics a little bit later if anybody has any more questions. But I think now we're going to transition to talk a little bit more about peer coaching.
Yeah, so you guys, Chris, if you want to stop share, I have a cool stat I want to share with you guys about peer coaching. Chris talked a lot about coaching for his team. It's a way that he spends a lot of his time, but peer coaching is also a really important aspect to how our team does developmental coaching. And so you can see here that 65% of all sales reps say that peer coaching is more effective than coaching from their own leader or their organization. And so we, in addition to all those things and goals that Andy's crushing over there, he also is our team lead and does peer coaching for our team. So I'm going to stop share and let Andy talk a little bit about what that looks like, how we do that through Ambition.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. And thanks, Chris, for walking through all that stuff. Yeah, awesome to be here. Thank you to all the participants for joining. Thanks, Mark, for shouting me out on that cold call. Still remember that one. Glad you're on the line. Yeah, so I think, how we use ambition, what Chris just showed, peer coaching, and kind of what the sales world looks like right now. It's all really interconnected. So it's a really interesting topic. Before I jump into kind of the specific topic of peer coaching, just to kind of follow up on the stuff Chris shared, scorecards are so important to me personally, and I know they're really important to the team. The feedback loop that it provides to let me know where I'm at compared to everybody else on the team, because I always want to be number one, is really important. And if I start sliding halfway through the week and somebody's in front of me, I want to catch them. Like Chris was just sharing that competition that I'm in second place with JVP, Josiah. It's my goal to make sure I catch him before the end of the day or early tomorrow morning when the competition ends. So it just really provides visibility and motivation to me and the rest of the team. But specifically on the scorecards, both the activity and the objective score, we've spent a lot of time playing with those metrics and the limits on those metrics. And, Chris has talked to me and we've talked to the team, and we spend a lot of time discussing how we feel about that score, and if we hit 100, the chances of us hitting our goals for the week. And we've done a lot of trial and error and changed things on a regular basis to fall to where we are at now. And I think everybody on the team really likes where the scorecards are at, and because we feel like we truly feel like if we do those activities every day and reach 100 or more than 100, we're going to hit our goals. And like you can look at the timeline graph where you can see, if I've gone way over 100, those are usually my best weeks and I can pick it out. So if you're either new to ambition or you're a rep and you don't feel like that about your scorecard, just talk about it with your team, talk about it with your manager. Feel free to reach out to me or Chris at any time. We're happy to talk about how we fall on what we really like about our scorecards and how we figured that out. Like one thing that we did is we maxed out the sequenced activities metric. So you can't you can't blow your score out of the water by just emailing a bunch of people, right? We use outreach. It'd be really easy to email 500 people and bam, you're at 100 for the week in the click of a button. So we maxed that button out, or that metric out, but not maxed out calls, connects, talk time, because those are really important. And the more you do of those, the more likely it is you'll be successful. So just if you don't love your scorecard, figure out a way to change it. Talk to your team, talk to your manager, talk to us at Ambition, your customer support rep, me, reach out personally, feel free anytime, and we can figure that out. Same with the objective score, right? Usually the objective score is just going to be your quota, so it's pretty easy to figure that out, but kind of along the same lines. So peer coaching. Before I jump into what I'm doing today with peer coaching with the Ambition platform, I want to just give you a brief introduction of who I am and how I ended up at Ambition. I'm 35 years old, so I'm probably on the old side for SDRs out in the SaaS community today. And maybe that has something to do with why I'm successful. Maybe it's just that I've been an SDR for a long time now. But I didn't get into sales. I didn't know what an SDR was. I didn't know what SaaS was. I didn't know this world existed until I was about 31 when I ended up at a company called Inside Sales Team. They're now called Alley-Oop. Miss you guys, love you guys. But they're an outsourced sales development shop. So lead generation, marketing, appointment setting. And a friend of mine worked there, referred me. I'd done a lot of different things throughout my 20s. Lots of interesting stuff. That's another story for another day. But I did do debt collections for a few years in Buffalo. So I had some phone experience, but that was about the extent of my sales experience. And it's not even really sales experience. So anyway, a friend referred me to Inside Sales Team, hopped on board there. Basically, they have a lot of different clients, typically SaaS companies all over the country, sometimes the world, that use them to get appointments, get leads, get appointments on the calendar for their AEs. So I started there. I got trained up. I, got placed on a project and kind of learned the ropes of what it meant to be an SDR, and was successful pretty quickly. Was on a bunch of different projects, called into lots of different industries, verticals, personas, C-level all the way down to managers in any vertical, or industry you could imagine. So I got a lot of varied experience on the phone, talking to a lot of different people. And one of the main things I learned there was that, there's fundamentals to a cold call and a talk track. And, it's not all about the specifics of your product. There's an art to it. And I think I was able to learn some of those important fundamentals to be successful and translate that to when I finally ended up at Ambition. Anyway, Ambition was a client of ours. I ran the project. I got to know, the three co-founders and Mark, our VP of sales, back in May of 2017 when there was 15 people working for the company, and started setting meetings for him as an outsourced vendor. So I became friends with everybody over here and, really love the Ambition team, the product, the company, everything about it. I worked for him for about 1.5 years as a vendor before I kind of moved up to a management role at Alley-Oop. And they were a client of ours for a little bit longer. Then they left to start their own SDR team, kind of bring it in-house and do it themselves. Mark always told me that if I ever left there, I better give him a call. So I did the management thing at Inside Sales Team Alley-Oop for a little while, and for about 6 months, and didn't really dig it. I've got kids already. I didn't need any more. I'm more of an individual contributor guy. So I called Mark up and asked if he still wanted me, and he sure did. So I came over officially in September of last year. So I've been on the Ambition train here officially since September of last year. Came on as an SDR team lead because I already knew the product. I already had a lot of relationships, with my LinkedIn network, and kind of just could jump right back in and hit the ground running. But coming on with kind of a senior role, they asked me to do some peer-to-peer coaching to impart wisdom to the team that was growing and building, to make sure that tribal knowledge I had, everybody had access to it. So I was all for that. And yeah, started in September of last year, and it's been awesome since. It was really cool to come back and see how big they've gotten, how much they've grown in their space, and the impact they have in the SaaS world today is just really cool. So anyway, peer-to-peer coaching. We use Ambition. Chris walked us through what it looked like. You guys can all see that as customers, what it looks like in your own instance. But it's really, kind of the philosophy behind why it's important. The heart of it is what I want to talk about. And it's been a really cool experience doing it with the SDR team at Ambition. Basically, I was able to get permissions in the app to set up my own one-on-ones, my own coaching sessions, check-in program with all the reps on the team, and came up with a list of questions. My questions are, I'm specifically focused on call coaching because I feel like that's my strongest skill as an SDR, and where I could kind of impart the most wisdom the quickest. And it's fun. I love listening to calls and coaching on them and giving feedback. So my questions are just like, what was your best call last week and why? Put the link in here. What was your worst call last week and why? What's one objection that you've been struggling with or you struggled with this week? And where else are you struggling? So I'm asking for 3 call recordings and then just kind of a, brief gut check of how are you doing? Like, what's up? Is there anything you want to talk about? Anything you want to vent about? So these are cool for a lot of reasons, but really there's no pressure in these meetings because I don't hold a quota over the team. Like, I'm not responsible for what they do. So it's strictly fun, strictly for getting better, developing, forming friendships and bonds between the SDRs on the team. What's cool also is that it's visible to Chris. So Chris can go in and see that they've been filling these out, what notes they've put in, what notes I've put in, and what scores I'm giving them. So he has kind of another place to go to see how folks on his team are developing. And they're coming to these meetings, just looking for help, looking for feedback. And it's really great because it takes the pressure off, so they don't feel like they have to prove anything to me. And it's another opportunity for them to go back throughout the week and just listen to a few of their calls and reflect on where they've struggled, where they've done well. What's one thing they don't know about, what's one thing they had a great experience about and worked for them, right? And I don't know everything, and we all know that in sales development, the landscape changes like a snap of a finger, obviously, with what we're going through right now. But things are always changing, always in flux. So I'm always learning new things and paying attention to the trends that everybody's hearing out there. And we're always sharing that as a team. So it's just another opportunity for us to connect on a one-on-one basis, to share some feedback. I can learn from them, they can learn from me, and give Chris that extra development check-in each week that he doesn't have to facilitate. Sometimes he joins, sometimes he doesn't. And then one of our other senior SDRs on the team, Garrett, had the idea that we should do a session with the whole team and myself where I fill out the same form and pick my best call, my worst call, what objection I'm struggling with, and any other good examples of like going up against a competitor objection and how I rebutted it or something like that. So it's a really fun way. We do that at the end of the week on Fridays. It's a fun way for me to kind of show them that I'm just I'm just a dude out here making cold calls, getting rejected by lots of people, and having a hard time a lot of the time as well. And that it's not like I pick up the phone and somebody gives me a meeting. It's just as hard, I go through the same struggles they do. We get to make fun of me a little bit, and kind of connect as a team, which is really cool. The really simple but powerful thing about it is that it's all right there. It's in Ambition, where we're always living. I can go back and look at Garrett's call coaching sessions for the last 3 months and see where his objection, where he's struggling has changed. He's not struggling with the same objection over and over again. His objections keep changing. He keeps making progress. Our new reps we've got a couple new reps that are still ramping, just ramped on the team. So seeing their progress is like week over week, they're making incredible amounts of progress, and you can hear it in the calls just by, listening to their first call coaching session to a month later, and it's a world of difference. So I think the high level is that it's just an extra touch point for development, bonding, friendship between the team. That's no pressure situation. And also it gets you, if you guys were going to do this yourselves as customers and start implementing some of this, it gives you another touch point on learning the platform, how to use it, what it looks like, what it feels like. So if you do make the move to management or, go to another company and use Ambition there, you will have more familiarity with the platform. You'll have more familiarity with coaching, what it feels like to coach, some tips and tricks and things like that.
One thing I really loved that you pointed out, Andy, was like the information sharing and like the tribal knowledge concept. And I know that especially in this time, like with the landscape changing so fast and objections changing a lot, like you called out, you have shared some trends that you've been kind of seeing and conversations that you've been having based on that. So I wanted to share a couple of those stats about some metrics you gave me and see if you could talk through some of those things that you might be talking about in peer coaching or, the really right now today kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I put together just a few stats from last week versus a month prior to that, when the world was still normal, right before the crap hit the fan, and found some really interesting things, right? When we first, everybody got quarantined, everybody went remote. I already worked remote too, just so everybody knows. I was already a remote employee, but that doesn't mean things didn't change for me. I've got, two boys, 11 and 4, my wife, who are all now home, and my wife's a saint. She's doing most of the homeschooling. I just come out of the dungeon here to cook them lunch and play outside for an hour or something, but it's definitely different than what it was before. So just because you were working from home originally before all this happened doesn't mean it's the same situation for you now, right? But anyway, I put together some numbers because we were all kind of talking about it when it first happened. Like, what is the result of this? Like, what's going to happen? How should we approach it? Everybody on LinkedIn is, you know, giving advice on how you should approach a cold call. You know, some people are saying, some thought leaders are saying, don't sell anything. Some thought leaders are saying, go sell everything. You know, don't call, do call, email, personalize, don't personalize. You know, just like LinkedIn typically gets kind of conflicted messaging sometimes. It's hard to figure out what the right thing to do is. So we kind of fell on, you know, let's just go out there and make some calls and find out what people are saying and be as compassionate as we can. So I guessed that what would happen is, you know, for the first 2 weeks, there would be a period of just everybody in shock and afraid and anxious and not sure what was going to happen. And once the dust kind of settled and folks were able to move remotely and find out how their specific business, product, industry, vertical, whatever was being affected, they were going to be able to settle into kind of a new normal. Hopefully it won't last too long, but that's kind of happened. You know, we're in the 4th week, I think, of being remote, and definitely sensing that, right? People kind of know where they're at now, and they are, you know, doing what they have to do to either to deal with the situation where they're at. And I found they're kind of in 3 buckets. Either business as usual, you know, business hasn't been terribly affected by the pandemic and forcing everybody to go remotely. So they're just kind of still chugging along, doing their thing. Yes, they had to go remote. Maybe they were already, maybe they were flexible, a little of both, but pretty much nothing's that much different. Then there's a lot of people out there that their business is up in the air. It's been very affected, and they're scared, and they don't know what's going to happen. And you know, maybe their company's starting to lay people off. Maybe they're not, but there's rumors. Maybe, you know, they're pivoting their go-to-market strategy and their product strategy so that they can hopefully, you know, make it through this time, which is really scary. You know, and it's hard to call somebody and have that conversation with them, and you know, you feel bad for them, and you feel bad for even cold calling them. So in that situation, you just try to be compassionate. And then there's a 3rd bucket of people who are actually seeing an uptick in business, right? Influx of new business based on what's happening, because whatever industry or product they're selling is in greater demand. You know, maybe they support, maybe they're a software company and they support healthcare or logistics, and there's a demand for their service. You know, virtual meetings, Zoom, like stuff like this, obviously is seeing an influx in business. Laptop sales, stuff like that. So there's a lot of businesses that are doing well, right? And I'm sure they don't want to exploit that. It's a sensitive topic, but they're all facing different struggles. So anyway, the stats that are up on the page here is connect rates up 5% from 7% to 12%, you know, looking at 1 month ago and versus last week. Connect rates way up. People are at home. They don't have, you know, we call and C-level folks who typically are going from meeting to meeting, but also getting grabbed in the hallway or getting grabbed for this or that. So they're literally in the office. They have 0 downtime. Now, you know, they're going from meeting to meeting, but they have a half an hour break in between a meeting, and they're just sitting at their desk doing work. They're not being distracted by a million other things. So there's a lot more downtime for these decision makers that you're calling. So the connect rate's up. That's my theory, at least. Conversion to meeting last week was 10% converted to meeting. That's like, you know, from a connect to a meeting. I think that stat's wrong. Last month, it was higher than that. It was like 22%. So my conversion rate went from 22% in the first week of March to 10% last week, which was a huge drop. conversion to follow-up, which is I'm talking to somebody and having a conversation and they're interested, but it's not the right time for whatever reason. And they want me to follow up with them a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months from now. Went up from 50% the first week of March to 75% last week. So having a lot of more conversations, connect rates up, converting at a lower rate to appointment or meeting, but creating a lot of pipeline, having a lot of longer conversations. Our talk time's way up. We're creating a lot of pipeline for the future when this, when the world goes back to normal. So there's a lot of good things happening. And what I've kind of changed about what I've been doing on the phone, well, two things. The first thing I want to say is what I've changed about my outreach strategy in terms of like we use outreach. So in terms of my sequence strategy is I've gone from, I typically would put 50 tier 1 prospects into sequence each week. I've upped that to 100, and I've minimized the amount of personalization I'm doing because I've found that in the past, decision makers that I talk to take meetings for 3 reasons. They really appreciate my outreach because it's personalized and I did research that resonated with something that they're going through. I had a strong referral from somebody in their organization or somebody who they're close to, or they have an immediate need or pain that I've touched on with my messaging. So from post-COVID, what I found is the first two, I appreciate your research and your thoughtfulness in reaching out to me, and a strong referral really don't carry any weight. Now, yes, they still appreciate your outreach, but it's not the right time. So I'm responding to say, no, I'm not going to take a meeting right now. Or great, thanks, Chris, for connecting me to Andy. I really respect your opinion, but it's not the right time for us. So unless and then the third thing is, if they have an immediate need, which we can really help with managing remote sales teams. So that's kind of the need that I'm speaking to. They're very apt to just responding to short, simple messaging, even if it's not personalized. So I've pivoted to a more, I hate to say it, but spray and pray kind of strategy. However, I like to call it pray and spray instead of spray and pray, because I really believe we can help people. We have a product that helps people, and there's people in need of what we can do to help. So I'm trying to reach as many of those people as possible with really short, to the point messaging about what we do. And I'm making a lot more phone calls. So I've upped my calls, I've upped my people and my amount of prospects, so I can try to reach as many people as possible that might need our help today. And I'm having more conversations because of it. Most of my email responses are like, oh yes, we have a need, this sounds interesting, let's talk. Whereas when I was still personalizing a lot and spending a lot of time on each prospect, I was still getting the replies that I usually get. They just, if they weren't hitting, they weren't hitting, and they weren't going to take a meeting just based on, my personalized approach. And then on the phone, kind of the way I've been going about reaching out to a prospect with a cold call is basically the same as I always have, except I've added in, a little kind of personal blurb about how I'm doing right at the beginning. So originally I've always been kind of a cut to the point, cut to the chase kind of guy. Hey, Andy from Ambition, hope you're doing well. Can I steal 30 seconds, 20 seconds to explain why I'm reaching out? And I've always had a lot of good luck with this upfront contract and then getting right to the point about what we do and how we can help and seeing if there's interest. What I've changed post-COVID is just adding a little bit of more human element into that. Telling them, hey, how's it going? I'm doing okay, making it through. Kids are upstairs screaming and bouncing off the walls, but my wife's taking care of them, thank God, so that I can work. Just kind of throwing something like that in there to get the conversation loosened up a bit, and then going right to the upfront contract, asking for the 30 seconds, getting on with my pitch. I haven't changed my pitch much based on what's different in the world today, just because I didn't want to pigeonhole people. So I pitch them, throw in something at the end like, I know it's crazy out there, but am I crazy to think this is something that you'd be interested in talking about? From there, they give me what bucket they fall into, right? They either give me a normal objection that I would usually get in a normal world, which tells me that things aren't that much different for them, or they tell me like, crap's hitting the fan, I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow, at which point I just let them vent and hopefully have a compassionate conversation with them. Or they say, you know, sounds interesting, but we're all working remote now and we have more business than ever. We're just trying to manage our customers, make sure our customers are happy and we're taking care of their needs and, you know, handle all this business that's coming in, don't have any time to talk. Which is where then I would pivot to our remote use case and explain how we could help with that situation. But that we kind of fell on that. When this whole situation first started happening, you know, we thought, hey, we should lead our cold calls with, you know, how is the remote transition going for you guys? We can help with that. It's something that, you know, it's one of our strongest use cases. And we were pigeonholing prospects because they would say something like, we're not struggling with that, or we already had a remote strategy in place, or, you know, nothing's really changed for us, or, you know, screw off, our business is falling apart. So just taking the compassionate approach, not really changing much in terms of the pitch and letting people tell you where they're at is what's worked best for us.
On that note, about the pitch and, you know, what are you changing or not changing? We've had so many questions come in. So I would love to kind of just call on you guys, Chris and Andy, as I go through a couple, and we'll just go through rapid fire, like short answers and get through as many as we can, because there's been a lot of great ones, if that sounds good to y'all.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Chris, I'm going to give you this one here. What, from your understanding, is the best TV screen to leverage for sales performance?
Yeah, so especially, you know, in times like this, I think we want to be showcasing anything that is going to drive some of that competitive energy on the team. So any competitions you're running, I would make sure that those are on TVs to really increase that engagement level. And another suggestion that I would have for TVs is making sure that you are showing metrics. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but making sure you're showing metrics that the reps have control over. You know, if for instance, you're throwing up a closed won number up there and, you know, because of COVID, those numbers are much lower than they normally would. You want to be cognizant of that. That may drive disengagement. And so you definitely want to tell a good story by some of the TV screens that you're showing.
Thank you, Chris. Andy, I thought this one was really cool and interesting. It said business owners are answering their phones more than normal. Is there an approach that's different with business owners versus like a gatekeeper maybe?
Yeah, great question. I think the best approach is to not treat them differently and not be intimidated by them. We've actually decided as a team to shoot higher than we normally would. In good times, a frontline manager is the best person for us to start with because they can be a great champion and they really understand the pain that our product can solve. But in times like these, a frontline manager typically isn't going to want to bring anything to their boss just because everybody's, you know, frozen budgets. But if you get an owner or C-level person on the phone and they have an immediate problem, they're looking to fix that problem and they're more involved in fixing those problems quickly. So I would say, don't treat them any different than you normally would treat a prospect, and don't be intimidated. Pitch them, tell them what value you can offer, be a human and have a conversation with them. You know, take higher shots.
Chris, how have your competitions changed now that everyone's remote? What are you doing?
Yeah, so we're, you know, traditionally competitions for the SDR team is going to be around meeting set, pipeline opportunities, things like that. And this month we changed it up a little bit given the circumstances of COVID, knowing that more prospects would be a little bit reluctant to take a meeting immediately. I spun up a competition and called it April Conversations Bring May Conversions. And the two metrics that we're looking at there are call connects and talk time. You know, the real interesting one is that talk time has gone up quite significantly since COVID. And so I really want to incent the SDRs to have, you know, deeper conversations with their prospects, focus on building those relationships, knowing that, hey, it may not convert to a meeting this month, but you're building a relationship so that you're setting us up for success next month or the month after.
Okay, I'm going to skip over some of these because we're out of time, but we will follow up with you guys afterwards with a full Q&A download. But Andy, I liked this one, which is, meetings, people are probably having a harder time booking them. They really want to make sure they stick. How do you make sure your meetings stick?
I mean, I haven't really changed much in terms of that. I think I have a pretty good completion rate. I would suggest, and I don't always do this, but there was a question in here about video, the use of video in these times. And I think video is a great tool. I don't use it very often for prospecting a cold prospect unless I can't get them on the phone, but I like to send videos after I book a meeting sometimes, just to put a face to the name, send over some collateral that they can look at, something quick before the meeting. Just adding that face to a name really helps to get them to connect. And then I just pester them. I remind them the day before. If your prospect hasn't accepted an invite within 24 hours, I'm calling them back to say, hey, did I have your email address wrong? I saw you didn't accept this yet. Then reminding them the day before, reminding them the morning of, with an agenda in the invite about, what we talked about and why. So just being really disciplined with making sure your prospects accept your calendar invites. Using video can help, and following up the day before and the day of to confirm.
Awesome. Chris, which feature are you finding most useful right now of Ambition feature, like while remote?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit earlier about triggers, alerts that we're sending out. Those are huge. The competitions have been big to keep the team motivated. Spoiler alert here, Ambition just recently came out with a new feature. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but it's called Asks, which is really powerful in this remote setting, especially if you're managing a team with a lot of individuals on it. It allows each of your reps to submit an ask, and just saying, hey, I've got an idea about this, or I'd love us to build a goal around this. And so that's a feature we've been utilizing pretty heavily here recently with the move to completely remote.
All right, let's do one more, Andy. This one's very practical, but I think it's important. A lot of what we share is best practice. How do you track when you leave voicemails? What's your method? How do you track voicemails as a metric?
Yeah, I mean, I have them built into my sequence. So with my call sequence, there's a note that tells me to leave a voicemail. I think I leave 2 voicemails out of 4 or 5 calls in a sequence. And there's a disposition that I label it as a voicemail, so we know in the future that a voicemail's been left.
All right, I think we're just about out of time. If we did not get to your question or you still have one, feel free to connect with Andy or Chris on LinkedIn. We're going to send out a recording and a blog post recap of all the questions. You can also reach us at gethelp@ambition.com. We have a new customer Slack group that we all interact in and participate in, so join us there. We'll include the link in the recap. And thanks everyone for attending. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody attending.
Thanks, guys.
See you next time.